All right, 2 weeks ago, I promised you guys part 2 of killers who ended up on televisions for things unrelated to their crimes. Here we go. Here's part 2. All right, we already talked about the BTK killer, blind torture kill. We talked about the dating game killer, the grinder killer, which was the MasterChef guy, and we talked about the bullseye killer. All right, well, now we have several other ones. Apparently in 2002, 2 female students of the Soham, Cambridgeshire school, Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, went missing. They went missing on August 4th of 2002, and weeks and months went by, and as the time started going by and by and by, people started to get grimmer and grimmer. It gets pretty ugly. It so happened that they were actually kidnapped, murdered, dumped, and burned by the school's caretaker. The caretaker's name was Ian Huntley. Ian Huntley kidnapped the girls, murdered them at his home, and burned them and dumped them near an RAF base in Suffolk. He was, let me see here. He was seen being interviewed by at least 2 news stations, at least one of which is still active today. He was seen on Look East and Sky News, who both interviewed Ian Huntley about the incident, not knowing that he was the one that committed the atrocities. That seems to be a common theme with a lot of these serial killers. They just cannot wait to be on camera. In October of 2015, we're going to see a theme here. Deborah Kinsey, a 63-year-old woman, reported the murder of her friend, 64-year-old Charlotte Nicholas. Kinsey was actually interviewed by the news about the brutal attack of her friend, and Kinsey actually appeared visually upset and distraught over finding her friend brutally stabbed to death. However, upon further investigation, police found text messages that were very, very violent and heated between the 2 women, a dispute about jewelry of all things, which resulted in Kinsey going over to her friend's house and murdering her, and then later being interviewed by the news. Okay, this one is very, very interesting, and it actually has a very I don't want to keep saying interesting, but it really is. It has a crazy timeline. So this one is the Jeopardy killer. Here we go. Paul Curry evaded police for nearly 2 decades. He originally was on Jeopardy, a contestant who won, I believe, at least twice on Jeopardy in 1989. A few years later, however, in 1994, his wife died under suspicious circumstances. The autopsy revealed that she died of a nicotine overdose. The weird thing about this is she was not a smoker. So years and years and years go by until finally in 2014, after almost 2 decades of investigation, police finally caught up with the genius known as Paul Curry, and he was later convicted of poisoning his wife. This was such an interesting trial and interesting investigation that the show 48 Hours actually did a whole episode on him. They were so fascinated by his ability to stay ahead of the police for so long that they made a whole episode regarding Paul Curry as the Jeopardy killer, and they labeled it To Catch a Genius. Check it out on Google. Now, in case we had not had enough of serial killers ending up on dating shows, make sure you check out part 1, which was on this podcast. We have another killer who ended up on a dating show. This one is a dating show I have never heard of. It's called Megan Wants a Millionaire. And the premise of the show is basically a bunch of wealthy, successful men compete for the affections of a very materialistic blonde woman who wants a rich guy. Basically, it kind of seems like a really old social commentary for the society we're living in now. But I digress. Ryan Jenkins was apparently a wealthy real estate developer who was one of the men on the show Megan Wants a Millionaire. What's interesting about this is he was killing one wife while looking for another. He ended up being convicted of killing his wife Jasmine Fiore while he was competing for a new wife on the show Megan Wants to Be a Millionaire. He brutally murdered his wife and then disposed of her in a trash bin, and then went on the show Megan Wants to Be a Millionaire. He mutilated her remains, threw her in a trash bin, went on the show, and was later was later accused and convicted. He actually fled to Canada, evading police, and he holed up in a shabby sort of motel, upon which he killed himself before he could be apprehended by police and extradited back to the United States.